for starting a minute or two late. There's always some sort of a technological glitch. I don't really get it, but I don't know. Here we are. Glad to see you. So I want to make a few announcements before we get into the heart of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about top stitching on knits, particularly in hems, and we're going to talk about one fitting solution at the end, and I'm going to show you some fabrics as well. But I've had some questions about the status of Blueprint and your memberships. And frankly, I don't know very much, other than I do know that Blueprint is working on getting whatever you own into your hands. So I think you just need to maybe give it a little bit of time. They're still operating in that regard, and they're working out some of the details of getting you the classes that you own. Excuse me. So that's about all I know. I don't know very much more than you do. I wish I did, but just wanted to make that announcement because people have been calling me and asking me about what can they do about Blueprint. So also, thank you so much for all the questions and answers that you've been sending. Last week I announced that we would do a special question and answer Facebook Live. Well, we've been flooded with questions, and so now I'm really going through the process of sorting through them and seeing if I can group them in sort of like topics. So I think it may be that I either do a whole question and answer Facebook Live, or I'll do several, or I'll include them in the regular Facebook Lives that we do. So I'm not sure, but just know that I'm getting your questions, I'm reading through them, I'm going to deal with one of them today, so all is good. All right, I just wanted to tell you too of what I've kind of been working on. I posted this a while back on Instagram, but I have a separate personal Instagram page, Linda Lee Threads, and of course we have the Sewing Workshop Instagram page as well. And I'm not really sure. I think I posted it on both, but I'm not totally sure. But in this time where I'm spending a little more time at home, not venturing out except to come to work, and you know, now of course things are opening up for us and I'm beginning to be out more, but a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I made myself some nice pajamas. So here are my pajamas. And I used our Eureka top pattern, which I think is the perfect t-shirt for summer, but also perhaps a pajama top. And I like to sleep in shorts in the summer. So I used the West End pants and just simply shortened the leg and used the regular waistband elastic. Didn't bother to put the pockets in, just closed that all up. So now I have my summer pajamas. And because I've used these, and because I'm showing them today, the Eureka top and pants pattern, top and skirt pattern, and the West End top and pants pattern are on sale for the next week at 15% off. So check that out. This Eureka top is a quite interesting, Erin's telling me something here. Okay, so we have a code?
Yes.
Oh, you need to use a code, all caps, top stitch, to get your 15% off, and you do that at checkout.
Yes.
Yes, all right, thank you for the reminder. I didn't know that. All right, this Eureka top, we have made it in a lot of variations, and here's one that I really like. I contrasted the sleeve bands and added this double layer band at the bottom. And then I added some piping, which I made on my serger using woolly nylon over a strip of a sheer knit fabric, kind of a mesh that you can buy on the roll for, I can't think of the name of it all of a sudden. My mind is blank. Well, I'll find it and post it. The mind is going. At any rate, a couple of times down the edge of this sheer mesh, it's a stretchy mesh, and with woolly nylon, and you can make your own piping that you can insert into the neckline seam or separate the bottom of the t-shirt with the band on the bottom. We also have made the Eureka top as a tunic or a dress. And this was made out of a couple of remnants, so just slice this up a little bit to be able to use the remnants, and it makes a great little summer dress. So the Eureka top pattern is very useful from pajamas to tunics to tops. It's a great pattern. The other thing that we've been working on, I thought I'd give you a sneak peek of our next pattern. So we're really excited about this pattern. Here it is. It's a t-shirt, top, sweatshirt, casual top, but it has a very interesting sleeve to it, pleats on the sleeve that give it this volume at the bottom. And then of course the right front and the left front are offset, both at the top of the neck and the bottom. And the back has a little bit longer back to it, a little bit curved, so it's a nice shape. So we need a name for this shirt. And we're asking you to think about what the name should be and post that on our Facebook page. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat this morning. Post your name, suggestion, and if we accept the name, you'll get a free pattern when it comes out. So, new pattern. All right, we have some, I've talked about some pants fabrics recently. I have on the Picasso pants again today in the cotton and lycra that I love so much. It's my favorite fabric for summer, and I love these Picasso pants. I've just worn them to death. So here's the SKU number for that cotton lycra. We have it back in stock, and we also now have it in navy. And then this is the SKU number for the black viscose and linen that I also like and have a pair of Picassos out of. And then this is the SKU number for black silk and linen. We also got that in some colors, this beautiful rose color. When you get this fabric, if you happen to order it, there's a certain crispness to it, or stiffness, but when you wash this, it softens, becomes super drapey. It's a wonderful fabric for pants. So just because it says the word silk on it, don't be afraid of it. It's silk and linen, so it has some properties of linen. It will wrinkle a bit, not as much as pure linen, but it's a great fabric in lots of colors. So those are back in. And then you're going to have to bear with me a minute because I'm going to talk about a program that we have had for 9 years now called So Confident. And it is a membership program for $249 a year. Is that the price, Erin? Yes, thank you. $249 a year. You get a lot of content. You get a magazine every month. And the magazine can be printed out on your home computer in this size, or you could send it off, or maybe you have a printer that will do this, and you can print it full page, double page. But it's just chock full of information. Lots of pages of inspiration, beautiful photography for color and style. And then we get into the heart of a pattern, and with pattern work and fabrics and techniques. So with that program, you get 12 magazines, and then you get 4 patterns that are exclusive to So Confident. The first pattern that we have is the Detour jacket, which for the first issue we made into a duster length coat in this beautiful silk twill. And we talk about how to lengthen the pattern, how to line the pattern, and do some special things to it. The next month, in February, we taught you how to do Hong Kong finishes on the inside and how to underline. So not only are we inspiring you with style and color and beautiful clothing, but chock full of techniques and pattern work as well. And the third month, we made it into a vest in this fabulous fabric that's linen with this little metallic dot on it. I'm crazy about this fabric, but it's simply leaving the sleeves off, knowing how to make some facings when the facings are not included in the pattern, and also how to face things with another kind of fabric, silk organza. That's all about the Detour, so that was January, February, and March. And then the next pattern that we introduced, exclusive to So Confident, is the No-Toe Tee. And I have it on today. And I have it on in one of these big graphic prints, and didn't bother at all to think about how to lay it out. I just went for it, and the pattern ends up where it ends up, and it always works out just fine. But you can see that there's it's a little more of a pegged style, has a cut-on sleeve, cap sleeve, and then it does slim down into the hips. It has a deep hem, 2-inch hem, and it has a deep 1-inch shoulder seam. So I love this t-shirt, especially for summer. You can wear it under a lot of things or by itself. So we did some things to it. We've made it double layered, and we've done everything from inserting a sleeve, shoulder contrast, to again double layer, and this time just bringing the shoulder seam forward a couple of inches so you see this back color on the front side. We've made it into a dress by lengthening it using a twill ponte knit, putting a slit on the side, using an overlapping raw edge seam technique down the front. But all of these are variations of a pattern that you get with So Confident, and then every month we do something with it. And I want to show you a really fun variation of the no-toe tee, where we've added some ruffles. And we've actually decided this is going to be a pattern. We haven't quite turned it into that yet, but it will be. We have a diagonal seam on the back, and then these wonderful, they're curved pieces of ruffle that are attached to straight edges, so it creates this nice ruffled effect at the bottom. So those are our no-toe tees. No-toe, by the way, speaking of names, is that we name our patterns generally for things that have an association for us. And no-toe is our arts district in North Topeka, north of Topeka. Get it? Okay. The next pattern that's coming out in July is a pants pattern, and it has a pocket to it, side seam, a little bit of a cropped length. We made it in this fabric, Erin made it in this fabric to go with this t-shirt combination. It's a great combination. So this will be the next pattern coming out, and then the fourth pattern is a shirt jacket that's very interesting. So we spent a lot of time developing our So Confident program, and we hope that you'll join us. Even if you join now, you get the content from back in January. So don't worry, you'll get the whole year. And of course, you can always sign up for any of our So Confident years back to Series 1 through Series 9 at any time. So, all right, that's my plug. I'm sorry about that. I know people don't always like plugs in Facebooks, but, you know, forgive me. So now we're going to get into sort of the content of the day. All right, I want to talk about hems, because I know that a lot of you, in fact, I've had conversations with people this week by phone saying, I'm getting ready to tackle knits for the first time. I've sewn for 40 years, but I've never sewn a knit fabric. And so there's still this intimidation factor about knits. And partly, well, there's lots of reasons why, but one is jersey knits, of course, curl. So then that's, how do you deal with that? And they stretch out when you sew them, particularly on the cross grain, because that's the stretchiest part of a knit. So as you're hemming a garment, such as this, if you're just trying to sew it on your regular sewing machine without any tools or tips, then you're going to be frustrated because you're going to get a stretched out hem. I call them blips, bubbles, whatever. So we're going to tackle that today and show you how to tame all of that. All right. So these are the things you're going to have to remember to deal with or think about for sewing with knits. You need the right thread and needles, and probably one or two of these other things, but you may need all of them, as I do. First of all, you're going to sew all knits with polyester thread, good quality polyester thread. We sell Metler here. We've added that option on our website so that if you order a fabric, you can order from 1 to 4 spools of thread. So just know that that's a new option for you. I have dialed down the size of the needle that I use on all fabrics, and particularly on knits. So the 70mm needle is my go-to size. Now, my particular Bernina sewing machines happen to like universal needles, but you know, I own all the other kinds of needles, from jerseys to ballpoints, to chrome, to sharps, to whatever, because if I'm sewing a knit, and this has happened, and with my universal needle I get a skip stitch or something's just not behaving, I'll switch needles. I've even changed brands of thread sometimes if I've got trouble. So just know you keep changing that combination until you get a pure stitch. I happen to have an even feed feature on my sewing machine, which I engage all the time, and particularly on knits. But if you don't have that, you're going to want to add a walking foot to your assortment of presser feet. These are not inexpensive items, but whatever the cost is for your brand of sewing machine, you're going to want to buy this. If you don't have a walking foot option for your brand or age of sewing machine, you can buy generic walking feet. And so think about that. They're not quite as effective, but they're a lot better than not having one at all. So when I bought my sewing machine, one of my sewing machines, the one that I like a lot also embroiders, which means that it comes with a throat plate that has a really wide opening, a 9mm opening. Well, that means that the fabric can really get sucked down into that opening when you're stitching it, particularly on tissue weight knits, really thin knits, novelty knits, lacy knits, and that sort of thing. So I bought two other throat plates. I bought a single hole throat plate, but the one that I have on my sewing machine all the time now is a 5.5mm opening. So you should be able to go to your dealer and ask for a different throat plate. It'll be an additional purchase, but again, well worth it. And then I use tissue paper many times. I save the tissue paper from my patterns, and I use this as an underlayment between the throat plate and the presser foot. So it's underneath the presser foot, and the fabric is on top of this, and I'll stitch through one or two layers, and you'll just be amazed how much flatter and smoother your stitch will be if you stitch through tissue paper, and then of course it'll just come off, just tear right off. So it's not a problem to get it out of there, and you never see any residue of the tissue. So those are your 5 tips for stitching knits, whether it's hems, seams, top stitching, putting on a binding, putting on a pocket, whatever. These are the things you're going to want to make note of and keep by your side to remember when you are sewing knits. Okay, so we've talked about knits that curl. All you have to do is pull a jersey on the cross grain and the fabric will curl to the right side. There's the curl. Well, we want to pre-press our hems in place. We've talked about this in an earlier Facebook Live, but I want to reinforce it. After I cut out my pieces for my knit garment, I immediately prepare the hems. I'm not stitching the hems yet, but I'm getting them ready. So I use a product called Fusy Web, which is a paper-covered line of glue. Once I press this tape on to the bottom of the fabric, that settles that curl down. I'm on the wrong side of the fabric, and so all of a sudden the curl is not a factor. This paper comes off normally, and it leaves this little tacky line of glue. But before I do that, I leave the paper on for the duration of the sewing of the garment. This comes off when I'm ready to hem my garment. But I also want to create this little memory crease. So I'll have a template cut out of tagboard or a manila file folder to the exact width of my finished hem. And I'll put that on the wrong side of the fabric and then bring my hem up and over so the top edge of the fabric meets the top edge of the template, and then I'm pressing through all of those layers so that I get a crease that when I then put my garment back together with the side seams, back seams, whatever, I'm now in the round and I have an easy line to follow for repressing my hem and gluing it down. So all of my hems, it doesn't matter what depth, what height, what fabric, what garment, are always glued down before I do my stitching. Now, you have a lot of choices of stitches. For certain garments that are not particularly close fitting, you can simply use a straight stitch. Because knits don't ravel, you can leave the edge raw on the inside of the hem, or you could use a 3-thread serge finish and finish that first if you prefer that look, and then straight stitch it. Another stitch to use, and I don't have a sample of it here, is to use a nice zigzag. I think a zigzag stitch is a very pretty stitch and can be your finish on a hem, and it can be visible, or it can be you can use matching thread and hardly see it at all, but that gives you a little more stretch. The polyester thread is going to give you a little bit of stretch, but if you have a close fitting garment and you're trying to get it on, you're likely to get some pop stitches. So you may want to experiment with some other options. The stitch that I never use is the one that is pre-programmed in my sewing machine as a knit stitch. There's too much thread, it's a back and forth stitch, and it's a nightmare to rip out. A nightmare. So I never use it. I would rather you use a very, very small zigzag, if you use any sort of zigzag at all, for seams and so forth. But that's another story. Okay, a lot of people use twin needle. And before I owned another option, twin needle was something that I occasionally used. But one of the problems with the twin needle is, for me, is that I get this tunnel, particularly on a wider twin needle. So I do try to use a narrower twin needle if I use it at all, and frankly I don't use them anymore. But I just have, and even with paper, holding my mouth just right, sewing in the morning rather than night, all kinds of things, I cannot get a flat stitch with a twin needle. So I've invested in the whole idea of cover stitching. And of course, cover stitching shows up on every piece of ready-to-wear that you own. If you've bought a t-shirt, any sort of knit garment in recent times, it's going to be cover stitched. You're going to see 2 to 3 rows of stitching on the right side of the fabric, and you're going to see this sort of connecting zigzaggy type stitch on the wrong side. But these 2 stitches, 2 rows or 3 rows, right side or wrong side, are completely reversible. I've seen many a garment that the wrong side, what we think of as the wrong side of cover stitching, is used as the right side, and it's quite attractive. So here's my tip for you. It's kind of an expensive tip. You can buy a cover stitch feature as part of a serger, an overlock machine. But because there is a different threading system that's involved with both chain stitching and cover stitching, then it requires some amount of change of rethreading, some more complicated than others depending on the brand of the overlock machine. So I own one of those, and I realized in making a garment that I wanted to be able to go back and forth from regular stitching to regular serging to cover stitching, and in the course of a simple t-shirt I was changing the threading 2 or 3 times, which took up a little time, a little bit of a pain. I didn't enjoy that part. So I now have my overlock machine that's also a cover stitch machine, dedicated as a cover stitch only machine. So then I bought a dedicated cover stitch machine that only does chain stitch and cover stitch, and it's always set up, and that's what I recommend that you do. Buy your overlocker, buy your cover stitch only dedicated machine. And you don't have to spend a lot of money for it. I mean, you can spend as little as $400 or $500, and you can spend a lot more if you choose to. But to me, the stitches from all of them, no matter the price range, don't vary enough to really think too much about spending a lot of money on one. I hope the dealers aren't listening today. All right, so cover stitching takes a garment into a whole new realm of sewing. It ups the quality of your sewing, the professionalism of your stitching, and they're intimidating, I have to say. I did a class for Blueprint on cover stitching, and I spent 3 months becoming comfortable with my cover stitch equipment. So now's the time for you to get comfortable. Get them out of the box, go to your dealership, sit down, have them really train you on it, and get comfortable, because I really think you're going to like the results. All right, I have one more little fun option to show you for hemming. This is a little piece of a strip of black and white striped knit. I've cut it about 1.25 inches wide. So for the bottom of the actual garment, this is folded under, and then I've placed this little strip of knit underneath that, used my fusee web to glue that in place, and then I zigzag stitched along here. So it just gives that a nice raw edge here, folded edge here, but it's a great little trimmed edge for any garment. And it could be contrasting, it could be the same fabric, it could be a print. Well, probably not a print, because it would roll perhaps. And you want to, if you find a jersey, it's going to roll, which might be cool. But if you use an overlock, that won't curl, and then it stays flat. So those are your hemming options. Have I covered everything?
Did you want to show that closer? We have a couple
you want to?
of requests,
Yeah, let's do that.
People
All right.
who can't quite see it.
All right. Is this close enough, do you think?
Yeah, and why don't you start at the top and
All right.
and then kind of move down so they can, you don't have to shift the board.
All right. So this is the fabric, and you can see how it wants to curl on the edge. And then here is the strip of fusee web that goes along the edge, and that flattens the curl. And then with the template, you now have this crease, permanent crease there. Not permanent, but a memory crease. Then this is a hem that is top stitched. You can see I've left the edges raw on the wrong side. Here's the one with the tunnel. I don't even like the way it looks on the back side, actually. This is cover stitching, 2 thread. The nice thing about cover stitching is it covers the raw edge on the inside, which to me is one of the greatest benefits. So you don't have to finish the edges first. I use a chalk marker, or chalkener, and a ruler to mark a line on the right side of the fabric, so that I have, and I use a clear presser foot on my cover stitch machine so that I can see where I'm going, and I can follow the chalk line. This is technically the wrong side of the cover stitch. There's the right side. This is the wrong side. And you see, this is a raw edge, and I still did a little cover stitching. I've seen this on very high-end garments as just a sort of trim, I'll call it. And then this is the strip of black and white interlock, raw edged, shift it up. All right. Is that better?
Yes.
And then this is a folded edge here with zigzag. Okay, got it?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. One other stitch that I want to talk about. A lot of people don't know about this option, but most sergers have a special and extra accessory that's a blind hem foot that you can attach to your regular overlock machine. And you can do a hem, a folded hem that is stitched, finished on the inside. You set this up like you do a regular blind hem foot on your sewing machine. And you can blind hem on the wrong side of the fabric, and what you get is just a nice little even sort of prick of a stitch. You can set this so you don't see any stitches at all, and of course that depends on your fabric. And if you use matching thread, you would not see the stitches. There are some applications, I think, where you don't want to have a top stitched hem per se. You don't want to see a row of stitching. Maybe it's a really refined dress, beautiful skirt, maybe a wrap skirt where you have a vertical hem, or a jacket, let's say, that has a deep hem, and you just don't want to see that top stitched edge. I suggest you investigate a blind hem foot on your overlock machine. Were you able to see that?
Yeah.
All right. Very good. All right. All right, so let's talk about one of the questions that came in this week. I believe it was from, hold on just a second. From Sally. Sally sent in a number of questions, but the one that I chose How much should I remove from a sleeve cap after I adjust for a sloping shoulder? All right. How do you know you even need a slope shoulder adjustment? The only way to really tell that is to take the tissue of your pattern, pin it at the shoulder seams, pin it at the side seams, not quite to the underarm, leave a couple of inches so you don't rip the tissue, but put it on. You're going to have probably half of a pattern. Stand in front of a mirror and then see if you can stick your finger under the shoulder seam and see how much room there is, and pinch the tissue to see how much you need to take out. That's going to reduce some of the wrinkles that happen when you have collapsed shoulders. You may already know you have sloped shoulders, so it's determining how much you want to slope the pattern. In this case, you take the front pattern piece and you start at the original neck point and you draw a new line, let's say a half an inch. 3/8, a half, a quarter, 3/4, that's about as much as you're going to do probably. And you're going to draw a new line down. So you're taking away this bit of fabric and you're moving that seam down. Whatever you take away on the front, you need to add to the back. So I've added a half an inch and redrawn the line again back to the original neck point. So this is just, you know what? This is absolutely wrong. Guess what? This is for a forward shoulder adjustment. Well, all right. This is what Facebook Live is all about. I can't believe I did this. This is not sloping shoulder. This is forward thrust shoulder. I am very sorry. I will do the sloping shoulder next week. So we're going to get a big old magic marker and mark that out, and this is called forward thrust. The same principle, though, on the sleeve applies. Let me think about this a minute. I can't believe I did this.
You would have to still change them.
Yeah. So that's right. Yeah, it's a totally different process for sloping shoulder. I can't believe I did this. Anyway, so the dot, now you've moved the seam forward. You know why I did this? Because I have to do this all my patterns. It's so automatic. I don't have sloping shoulders, but I do have forward thrust shoulders. Okay, so now that I've moved this seam forward a half an inch, I have to move this dot towards the front, which is towards the single notch, forward a half an inch. My apologies, Sally. Next week we will see sloping shoulder. I will say one thing, back to So Confident. We are preparing a fitting book that has all of these fitting techniques that I know and use and help people with by email, at our workshops and so forth. And that book is part of your So Confident membership. So it's a real great value that you're going to be getting here in 2020. The fitting book is part of your membership. All right. Let's look at some pretty fabrics. How about that? All right. All right. There's a category of knits that I sort of have a love-hate with, and it's called ITY knit. ITY stands for interlock twist yarn. And in the past, whenever I've seen ITY knits, they've been a little bit shiny, slick, reminded me of swimsuits. I just didn't really care for them. And they are, I could be wrong about this, but at least all the ones that I've ever seen are polyester. You rarely, if ever, see them in other fibers. The advantage of ITY is, because the yarn is twisted and creped a little bit, then these do not wrinkle. So they are the perfect garments to always have that look. If you don't care for wrinkling, what you're going to get with viscose and linen and all those other kinds of knits, you're not going to get wrinkling with ITY. But I ran into a couple of them recently. We just purchased them and they just came in, that are ITY knits that are not shiny and they're not glossy and they're not swimsuity. So I'm really crazy about them, and I thought I would show them to you. So this is a wonderful print that's probably upside down because of the way it's coming off the bolt, but you'll get the idea. Beautiful drape, doesn't wrinkle, washes beautifully, pretty indestructible as a knit. This garment's going to look as good 2 years from now as it does the day you made it. The other one is also an ITY. I'm into floral. I think it's because I've planted a lot of plants and flowers in my garden this year, my yard, and I enjoy going out in the evenings and just spending some time out in the patio and looking. So, okay, those are the two ITY knits that we have. ITY knits tend to be not as expensive anyway. I believe these are in the $18 range. We're using the same code, Erin, for the discount on this as well. So you're going to use that same Topstitch all caps code to get 15% off of those two fabrics plus the other fabrics that I'm going to show as well. This is another polyester knit. It's not an ITY, it's a jersey. But this Facebook Live will go down in history, let me tell you. But again, you have a real beautiful, soft, matte finish. This time more of a placement of a sprinkling of a bouquet of flowers. But I've never felt anything so soft. It'd be wonderful to wear for a dress, skirt, pants, shirts. We have that one in that color, and thought we had it in another color. Aha. Yeah, this beautiful wine with blue and gold and white flowers. Again, really soft matte finish. For a polyester, this is amazing. Not everybody wants polyester, I get that. In some hot climates, polyester can be less comfortable than other fibers, particularly viscose. So we have 3 cuts left of the fabric that I have on. These will be listed on a Facebook page. Is that how we do it? The links to these fabrics that I talk about.
And we have the category on the website.
A category on the website called videos. That's where we post the links. Yeah. But there's one that's just like it in another colorway. Now just remember, you don't have to be intimidated by the size of the scale of the motifs. Just cut it out. Okay. The one, I'm going to show the one down there, Erin, if you wouldn't mind. Remind me that one. This poor guy is collapsing in the middle on the tube, so it's a little cumbersome, but I am really crazy about this all over print. Okay. We have some new cottons in, cotton and lycra. And of course, there's nothing more comfortable and soft than cotton. We have this beautiful, beautiful fuchsia pink with splatterings of sort of carnation style flowers. Another floral. Pale tones of yellows and a neutral background. And then this was so popular we ordered it again. We just got it in again. I love this one. Lots of great colors in that. We have 3 knits in our sale category, and they're already reduced in price, but with that code you're going to get an additional 15% off. These are jerseys. beautiful viscose jerseys. This one in somewhat of an ikat design. I actually made something out of this one, which I love because it has my color of green in it. Now, these are fabrics that you can pre-wash. Every fabric's pre-washable. But this one, I did find that because the colors are so saturated in this, that I had to be more delicate with this and wash it in cold water rather than hot water. On my test sample, my 4-inch square that I first threw in the washing machine, I sort of thought that maybe this darker color faded a little bit into the white. I couldn't really tell, but just to be sure, I then washed the yardage in cold water and had no trouble. And then this all over, sort of a Liberty of London type print, only on a knit. Okay. Do we have questions? I bet we do. And I also have a request from a friend of ours that I need to repeat the questions so that you can hear the questions and know what I'm answering, which I get.
Let's see. We had some questions initially about the sizing on the no-toe tee.
All right, the sizing on the no-toe tee is pretty standard through the bust, shoulders, but it does narrow at the hips. You're going to need to measure this pattern and make sure you have enough ease. I recommend at least an inch of ease in the hips, and that depends on the fabric. If it's a fabric that's pretty stretchy, I suggest an inch. If it's something like a ponte knit or something that does not have as much stretch, you might want to have 2 inches of ease in the hips. But measure it and make sure you've got enough. We've done this garment flared a bit as well, and it looks just as good. This is, by the way, back here, a size extra large, and you can see that it does, it's sized and graded and not quite as pegged as some of the smaller sizes.
Okay, the theme of the So Confident with the metallic dots, so the detour vest, just wanted to know the theme of the fabric.
The theme?
Maybe just showing the fabric a little closer?
Yeah, the theme of this fabric, when summer starts to hit, at least in Kansas, it gets hot. And I like to wear white and neutrals, and I just sort of like the people who live in the desert, they like to wear white linen. So I wanted to do a whole white on white rendition of this, and this fabric is a handkerchief weight linen with little gold dots. These dots stay when you wash the fabric, but they tend to lose their color if you press over the dots. So if you like this fabric and get it, you want to press this fabric on the wrong side. I did do some Hong Kong finishing or binding using silk charmeuse in a little bit of an off-white for the front edge. And of course, it doesn't have sleeves, so we've used organza facings, because I didn't want to see double dots, didn't want to feel the dots either on the inside of the garment. So I've used the organza for the yoke facing and the arm side facing. But the theme is really just summer white.
The West End and Eureka pajamas, would that work in silk or cotton as well?
Oh yes. The West End pants can be made in any fabric, not necessarily knit. In fact, I think this is the first thing in knit I've ever made of the West Ends. I didn't repeat the question, did I? The question was whether the pajamas can be made in cotton or silk. So, absolutely. The West End pants it's a pattern that's built to be made in a woven, and so you can use silk, cotton, linen, any fabric that you want. The Eureka top, even though it says on the back of the envelope, you can make it in knits. I've made this in silk charmeuse. It's beautiful. Erin made it in chambray cotton. So yes, either one can be made in any of those kinds of fabrics.
We have a couple questions about your no-toe. They want to see it all the way around, so if
All right.
you could turn around.
They want to see the no-toe that I have on all the way around.
And,
So
also,
it's different on both sides.
and then also what size you're wearing.
I'm wearing a medium. The question is, what size am I wearing? I'm wearing a medium.
Okay, let's see what else we have here. Sorry, sometimes I get answered. How would you change the neckline of the no-toe top? Like, can you?
All right. Good question. How do you change the neckline of the top? There are a couple of ways. If you have a pattern that has a neckline that you like, you can superimpose a different shape, use that pattern, place it on the no-toe T pattern, and recut that. But the June issue of So Confident will have a V-neck option to the no-toe. So just remember that's coming. For those of you who are members or thinking about becoming a member, you will have that. In fact, the next t-shirt has a V-neck, it has some shaped seams and a couple of splits. So it's a different variation of the no-toe. But this neckline can be anything. This happens to be a neckline that I like because it's just high enough, but if you don't like it, you want more of a boat neck or more of a scoop, take another pattern, superimpose it on the pattern you have.
Okay, we have a couple questions about the fusee web. First one is, does it leave residue on your needle? And another one, someone was wondering, I think maybe she's confused about the fact that it has a tape that covers
Okay.
the...
So the fusee web is a paper covering over a sheer mesh bit of webby glue. So when you press it on, you're pressing over the paper, and then you take the paper off. Can you see that through the camera? Not much.
A little bit.
Yeah. Anyway, so the paper gets removed, and your stitch, and then something is fused together, a hem, or I use this. In fact, I could do a whole Facebook Live on how I use this. I use it on invisible zippers. I use it on seams when I'm matching stripes and plaids. I use it for hems. I use it instead of any sort of basting that I used to do. I rarely hand baste anymore. This is like a basting product. Now, when I stitch through it, it does not leave a residue on my needle. But I've always sort of flippantly said, if it did, it would be worth it to change a needle or clean my needle because the product is so wonderful and gives you so many other advantages. But I have never had any residue from this.
Okay.
By the way, let me just say one more thing. This is a much, much sheerer, lighter weight product than the other products on the market that you can buy that are thicker, and you can even see sometimes the line of glue in the impression of the line as you're pressing a hem using other products. This is the sheerest product on the market that I know of. We get it from Japan. We've sold it for years. We love it. I even cut it in half, so I'm using just skinny strips.
How do you stabilize the charmeuse sufficiently to be able to cut straight enough strips for the Hong Kong finish?
How do I stabilize the charmeuse enough to cut strips for the Hong Kong finish? First of all, you're cutting single layer, and I used to recommend that you lay out silk on paper, like medical paper, that has a little bit of a gritty side to it, so the fabric would be on the paper. I would pin the silk along the edge of the paper to hold it in place. But now my cutting mat on my table is so rough from all these years of cutting that tends to grip the fabric. So I just make sure that my selvage is lined up along the line on my cutting mat that has a grid on it, and use as long of a ruler as I can and cut it on the bias. And even though there's something called true bias, which is the exact angle of 45 degrees, frankly, bias can be a little off, and it's still going to be stretchy enough for the bias for there. So single layer is a big deal, and put it on a surface that has a little bit of a grip to it.
Does a no-toe work for a full bust?
Does the no-toe work for a full bust? I don't know why not. I don't have a full bust, obviously, but and do you have any experience?
I would think so. Just the curve of the side seam, and it doesn't have.
There's a fullness to this through the bust that I think. One of the tips that you will get in the fitting book is how to add bust fullness without a dart. That's a great little technique. So that's coming in the fitting book with So Confident. Well, actually, that is already in the Fitting the Bust tutorial that you can buy separately.
And can you buy that fitting book separate from So Confident?
Can you buy the fitting book separately? For now, it'll be exclusive with So Confident. I suppose at some point before I die, we'll put it out as a single item, but not yet.
We have a couple questions about small prints versus larger prints, and how you pull off the larger prints. We have some petite people who want smaller prints, but can they do this sort of print as well?
The question is, can a petite, smaller person pull off a larger print such as this? I think that you do have to think about, I say to you, cut this out randomly, let it fly. But there are probably some things to consider. For instance, a concentration of color somewhere, perhaps, and maybe across the bottom or across the top or across the bust or vertically. So maybe there's a philosophy of thinking about a larger piece. You can also cut patterns like this up and make things literally in strips of fabrics, and you're making a new fabric that is made up of smaller pieces made from a large motif. When you follow the fashion magazines and websites and all of that today, prints are everywhere, and they seem to be bigger than ever. And I don't know, I just think that, yes, maybe you're uncomfortable wearing a large print. Think about it for another part. Like last week or a couple of weeks ago, I had on the Odette top, which has sections. Maybe you use the large print for a section of a garment. Break it up a little bit.
Okay, linen knits. What patterns would you use for the linen knits? Fuller silhouette or close fitting?
What garments do I use for when I use linen knits? And by the way, I've just ordered a lot of colors of linen knit that'll be in a week or two. So I'll probably do a separate Facebook Live on sewing with linen knit. But the styles that I use for that kind have tended to be a little bit looser. I did make a Eureka top out of a linen knit, and I love it. Now, because it's a little bit sheer, I wear a tank under it. I have a pearl jacket that's loose and flowing, and of course I wear that over a t-shirt or something else. We've used it for, like next week, I'm actually going to show you, next week is all about summer dresses. And I'm going to show you an E-dress that has a linen knit as a bottom band. So I've used it as trims and areas, sleeves, bottom bands, neckline finishes. So it can just be pieces and parts. Did that answer the question, do you think?
Yes.
Okay.
The cotton knits that you showed, what patterns would you use?
Okay, the cotton knits that I showed, oh my gosh, that is a Eureka top. That's an urban t-shirt. That's an E-tee, swing tee, E-skirt, E-dress, Fillmore dress, Alex and Olive. I would say those cotton knits are can be universally used for anything that says knit. There is a drape to them, even though they're not as super slinky as some of the other viscose and polyester knits, but they're flattering.
Why does the no-toe have a 2-inch hem?
The no-toe has a 2-inch hem. That's a really interesting question. There used to be a designer, whose name I've promptly forgotten, high-end designer, who used to do 2-inch hems. And we back in the day were, copying details from really high-end designers, and the 2-inch hem seemed to show up. You don't see 2-inch hems at Walmart, but you see 2-inch hems at Bergdorf Goodman, for example, on certain garments. It's a design detail that I think adds a nice heft and look to the garment.
It's interesting. What pattern would make a good kimono jacket that is so popular?
Oh, what pattern would make a good kimono jacket? Do we have the deal for you? Erin, as we speak, is working on a remake of the Ikena jacket that will be coming out soon. I don't know, a couple weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. And we'll have that on Facebook Live, but that is the perfect kimono jacket. We've lengthened it, we've narrowed the lapel so it looks like a kimono. It has kimono-style sleeves. That pattern's coming.
I think we're good.
Okay, thank you so much. Next week, we're going to talk about dresses, and I hope to see you.